Hey, welcome to the show. Today we're going to talk about whether or not the crypto industry is headed down the same trajectory that we saw with the early internet. I'll give you my thoughts on that topic. I think there are some similarities and some differences. So let's break those down. Hey, welcome to the show. I'm Molly Elmore. David Schwartz was quoted in an article that I saw this morning that I will put in the description about the crypto industry following this similar trajectory of the internet in the early days. And one of the points that he made, which I agree with, was that, if you had speculated that search would be such a valuable tool, it was hard to know back then who was going to win the search war. Because when the internet started, there were many search engines. You had Alta Vista, you had Lycos, you had Ask Jeeves, Ask. There was a ton of them, including Google. And it wasn't clear back then that we would wake up one day and there would be none really other than Google. Even Microsoft had search for a while, so it wasn't necessarily just these sort of like .com-y startups. But the clear trend was that search had incredible utility in that it changed the way people looked for information. I mean, before the internet, you had to like go to the library and they had these like books, lots of these resource books. You'd have to look up old sort of photocopies of magazines on this stuff called microfiche. Like, I don't even really remember doing it. It was so long ago. But the tool, and it was very slow. So like if you wanted to look up some newspaper articles, I mean, you would spend hours and maybe get through 3 or 4, where internet search is obviously like practically what we would consider quantum speed, in that the search results come faster than I can possibly process them. Maybe not accurate for quantum, but my idea or my thought there is that it's faster than you could process. So that's a pretty cool example, and I agree with him in that. So neat article. But what I don't agree is that we're going to see consolidation in the same way with what we're going to call the internet of value. Some people like to look at crypto as different than the internet. I actually don't. I see that there have been stages of the internet, and this is when you talk about Web 3 versus Web 1. Web 1 was this first version of the internet where you had essentially information on websites. They didn't really have much functionality. They were like brochures. They were called content publishers. It was the origin of online media. And many of these websites wanted to make money. So the entire ad model was born. But it was kind of a solo, lonely activity using the internet. It was essentially an online version of a library where you had access to all this information that you read, researched, could forward, could save, could print, whatever. And then came Web 2, which is kind of the era that we're wrapping up at this point, which was where you had a lot more functionality, namely transactions, e-commerce. I mean, the birth of Amazon, the birth of websites that could buy anything you possibly want to buy, plus this ability to connect with other people. And you could call these communities. The origin of Facebook, social media, Twitter, etc., kind of changed the way people interact with others. And the big shift was that instead of using the internet being something you kind of did on your own, now you are able to connect and find all these other people who have shared interests, and you can make videos for each other. You can write blog posts. Like there was incredible expansion as to how these connections manifested in terms of the types of content that people were creating and sharing with other people. There was one major problem with the models up until now, which is if I wanted to pay you for something, I couldn't send you money through the internet. It might feel like I could. I could send you an invoice or something and you could say you're going to pay it. And it looks like we've had a transaction. Or I can buy something on a website, my credit card gets charged, and it looks like I've now bought this. But the actual settlement of the money itself didn't happen. So now we have this new era where the blockchain is the next step in this development process. And it allows for the fast, almost instantaneous settlement of these transactions. And unlike a credit card processor that charges a fee fairly substantial fee in some cases. We now have the ability to process transactions using the blockchain extremely inexpensively for fractions of a penny. So this is going to introduce this concept of micropayments. I did a video on micropayments. No, I did a tweet thread. I'll put whatever I did in the description below. And it's a fascinating way because it's going to shift business models in unimaginable ways. And every time I've kind of gone through the list of examples, like I keep going because there's so many businesses arrangements where you buy something and you kind of have to pay in advance or you have to wait and pay after. Let's say, for example, you want to rent a vacation rental home, right? Right now, you kind of have to agree to these set of dates and you like check in at a certain time and then you check out at a certain time. And for the most part, you pay in advance. So if you got there to this vacation rental and it sucked, it was messy or broke or gross, you have this problem now. You paid for this in advance and there's now this problem. So there was some counterparty risk here. You had to trust that the other side was going to do their thing. Now, let's say like you wanted to go rent this vacation rental and you just really didn't know how long it was going to be, like how long you wanted it for. Like, you're like, I might stay for a day, I might stay for a week. That doesn't really work in our current models. Like people are like, I need to know in advance. You got to book it in advance. Well, what if we had this scenario where I just rented it like by the hour, not to turn it into some like motel by the hour thing, but let's say you just hypothetically you wanted to rent this vacation rental for an unspecified amount of time, and you could now have these micropayments be processed regularly. That now it might have business implications, but now it's financially not a big deal. I put up my blockchain card. I don't know how that's going to work exactly, but you'll have some kind of wallet that'll have a smart contract and it will essentially drip funds from my wallet to the recipient's wallet on a schedule so that these payments are going through for the amount of time that we both agree on. Maybe the vacation rental is not the perfect analogy, but like let's say you hired me to do a service and I don't know how long it's going to take and I've decided that I bill hourly. Well, you have this same sort of counterparty risk where I either pay you, you pay me in advance, or I wait and I bill at the end. We have this counterparty risk problem. Like both of us in either of those examples, one of us has to trust that the other party is going to do what they say. Well, we have a new model now with micropayments, which is I can bill you every 15 minutes, every 20, like whatever. Because the transaction fee is so low, we can do this sort of streaming payment. This also could apply to utilities, your water bill, your electric bill, any kind of phone bill, cable bill, like all these sort of things where you pay monthly. And there's always this sort of question, do you pay in advance or do you pay after the month is over? And regardless, one side of the transaction has to endure some risk because there's this trust thing. So micropayments are going to change so many elements about how people transact with things. And those are just a couple of examples. But what we're going to talk about today actually is about content. So when Internet 1 came around, a decision was made that the internet somebody had to pay for it and that advertisers were going to pay the bill. And I worked in this industry back then and I was around when a lot of these problems were being solved. Like, how do we get the advertisers who have been advertising on TV and in magazines, how do we get them to want to advertise on the internet? They don't really see much value in it. People were not terribly bullish about the internet in the beginning. They thought there was sort of a little bit of a waste of time, that no serious business was on the internet in the beginning. And it was a lot of work convincing big advertisers, the Procter and Gambles of the world, General Motors of the world, to want to spend their money online on ads because they didn't have much confidence that it was a good use of their funds. Like they were like, hey, TV's working. Like if it ain't broke, why would we want to do this thing with the internet? So there was this big courtship between the publishing community of the internet and the advertiser community. We're selling them that this is going to be great. And the company I worked for, we measured ads. So we were very involved in it, trying to help prove that these dollars were well spent online. And this is the model that has been in place for a very long time. When Facebook came in, it changed everything in a very bizarre way. But pre-Facebook, you had all of these different websites that collected ad revenue to pay all the bills. Now, the thing that was difficult was that if I was a little tiny website and I wanted to monetize my website, this was before like WordPress and YouTube and stuff. What I had to do is I had to go out and get clients. Like I had to go out and get advertisers, and that's a lot of work. You need relationships, and you need to know how to sell, and you need to have contracts, and you need all these things that are not that simple to set up. So what websites did was they formed networks called ad networks, where they were sharing the cost of selling, essentially. And let's say I had a website and 10 other people did. We got together and then we pooled our resources to hire the salesperson. And that salesperson then went out and sold ads that ran across all 10 of our sites. And ideally in the beginning, the 10 sites would be like in the same category. So sales rep would go to a client advertiser and say, hey, I got these 10 sites. They're all similar. Your target market is visiting these sites. You should advertise here. And then these networks grew and grew and grew. And as more people came onto the internet, the networks were then, you could buy by like a type of content, like a finance channel or a sports channel or whatever, or you could buy across the whole thing called random network. I could talk about this for a long time, but the point is that the technology and the business models and the way things worked were completely aligned to the needs of advertisers. They were the ones who were paying the bill. That was the way it had to be because somebody's got to pay, keep the lights on. Inevitably, there were some problems. And I noticed some of these problems when I remember one specific example where this website called WebMD, I don't even know if they're really around anymore. They had all this like healthcare, health information. And the big pharmaceutical companies were all over advertising on them because they like to advertise particular conditions and illnesses and all that stuff so you can go and talk to your doctor about them. Pharmaceutical companies have very strict rules about advertising, but they also have very clever ways around them. And so what they created was this idea of what's called an advertorial, which like looks like an article, but it's really an ad. You see these in magazines and you see them elsewhere. But that was when that idea was birthed from my memory. And it sort of fuzzied this line between if you were a writer at WebMD and you normally wrote articles that you felt were fairly objective, now you're in the situation where you had to write this article that was really an ad. And you started to lose your ability to be an objective journalist. Now, I was not a journalist, so conjecturing what somebody felt like in that experience, but the line between what you could talk about that your readers or viewers wanted to know about and what served the interests of your advertisers, that line started to get complicated. So if you were a publisher and you wanted to cover some controversial topics, you had to be careful that you weren't disparaging the category or a brand of an advertiser. Like that was a big problem. If you put out something that, demonized some, a brand and that brand was an advertiser, like that was a big problem. So media lost their ability to be objective. And this is not unique to the internet. Like TV has had this problem, print has had this problem, which is why it's been speculated that one of the worst things that ever happened to media, period, was the ad-supported model because you can't serve two masters. So if I'm a publisher and I ultimately answer the advertiser because they're the ones paying the bill, I have to put their needs above the needs of the viewer. That wasn't a huge deal, really, until the last couple of years. Or it became a much, much bigger deal, in my opinion, in the last couple of years, where we saw that censorship and manipulation of perceptions became rampant on the internet. Now, propaganda and using the media to control perceptions is not a new thing. It's been around for a very long time. There's a reason why certain groups of people own media companies. It's not just to make money. There's another set of benefits to them. So as we go to this new model of the internet, there's an opportunity for us to shift away from ad model. And as somebody who worked in advertising for a long time, I have nothing. I mean, I think advertising is great. I think that you would never know what most brands are if there was no advertising. I've run ads, I've created ads. I don't have a problem with ads. I do, however, have a problem with ad-supported media because I've experienced what that conflict can be. But we needed it back then. There was no other way to get the bills paid. Like, the advertisers had money and they were willing to advertise. People were going to the internet with the expectation that everything was free and that users were not going to pay. Like, it was really the only choice we had back then. Things are different now. People are much more aware that when a product is free, you are the product. So when you go to a lot of these social media channels, sites, whatever, and they don't charge you for them, but they sell ads, you're the product. Like, all the data they collect about you, that is served to, your ads are served to you using that information. And if you've ever run ads with some of the social media platforms, it's kind of freaky, the amount of detail and the variables that are used to describe people. Like, it's not like the old school days of media where it was like age, gender, income. Like, there are very specific interests, beliefs. They know a lot about you. And that was the deal, but it doesn't have to be the deal forever. We don't have to, in Web3, be a part of content creator communities where the goal is to collect data about you to, in turn, influence your beliefs and perceptions to sell you stuff. I actually have way less of a problem with doing that to sell me stuff than for other more nefarious purposes. Like, if you want to profile me to sell me a new desk, like, that's fine, go for it. But if you want to profile me to influence how I vote about something or how I respond to something that's much bigger deal, I do have a problem with that. Now, this is where we get into this Web3 and the monetization and the fact that transactions are now low cost and micropayments will become a thing. The next version of the internet doesn't have to continue to be so centralized. We could see the proliferation of many, many types of content communities. Because remember, search is still a big deal. Like, if I want to find you, I search for you. I don't have to remember like your domain name. Like, my opinion, domain names have become way less important than they used to be because of search. Like, I don't have to remember the domain names of a lot of stuff. Like, yeah, I bookmark some things that are favorite, but search is powerful. And so if your site and the community you have and the interests that you represent and the topics that you cover are covered so that search will pick it up, like, that's a great way to get traffic. And this would allow these smaller communities to explore a new monetization system, which is basically micropayments. And micropayments work in a couple of ways. I mean, one is I could do a subscription where I have you pay monthly, but instead of paying for the entire month at once, we do a streaming thing. The model that I'm actually more of a fan of is more like the tip jar idea, which Locals uses this. And I think Library Odyssey use this as well. But I'm not making this up. This is being used in a bunch of places. But the idea is that if I go to your site and you're a content creator and you have a video that I like or an article that I like or found insightful, I'll tip you, 10 cents, like 50 cents. Like, the amount doesn't necessarily need to be big. In the same way that if you're walking by on a city street and somebody's like busking music, whatever, you can throw a buck in the guitar case thing. Similar idea that I found that valuable. I'm just going to chip a little bit your way. And when you have a large following, a large community of people, those tips can add up. And that can create an entirely new revenue stream that frees a content creator from having to honor the needs of the advertiser over the needs of the user. So we can have more honest coverage of topics, we can have more honest discussions. I wouldn't have to be concerned with not going there because my advertiser or the platform itself has a particular political agenda or something else that they want to protect that makes it so I can't cover what I know the readers or viewers or whatever want to hear about. And this, I think, is one of the coolest innovations in the next generation of media, is not having to serve the advertiser master. And, I know advertisers will find another way. They always figure it out. I mean, we sort of saw the rise of product placements in movies and entertainment when there was some pushback around advertising a while ago. So they'll evolve, and the creative forward thinkers will find new ways for advertisers to sell stuff. So I'm not worried about advertisers at all. They'll be fine. What I am worried about, though, is the ability for content creators and journalists and media writers, whatever, to be able to continue to share what they want to share without this barrier, without having to be concerned about what this third party thinks and the third party concerns. Because as a content creator, if I can just focus on what the readers, viewers want and need and are interested in hearing about, it makes that relationship much more simple. We can have a more honest relationship. Because here's the other reality is that if I'm on a site that's ad supported and I know there are specific advertisers that are paying the bills, I can't really be honest with viewers about that. That's like totally inappropriate. Like you can't explain the true nature of that deal. So there's this sort of layer of dishonesty, which kind of sucks. And as we move to Web3 and micropayments, I think we're going to see a big change in that, and we'll have a lot more honesty in reporting. Now, here's my concern, because things that sound awesome don't always happen, is that the powers that be that like the current system where perceptions can be managed, perceptions can be filtered, I don't think they want to give that up that quickly. So it's ultimately going to come down to us as users deciding that we want to support these new business models in an effort to get more honest reporting and shun these ad-supported models where we know that censorship and curation of perceptions is happening at scale. So I don't think that the Web 2 incumbents are going to be excited about this. They will probably resist. They'll probably use some kind of clever sales pitch to make it seem like you got to stay here. But as viewers, as readers, as listeners, we have the choice to go to these new models and monetize them in a new way. Because don't forget this. I mean, this is really important. If you don't have to pay, either that entity is getting money from somewhere else, or you are the product. Like somebody's got to pay. Otherwise, you don't have a business. That's just the reality. You can make the choice to participate in essentially crowdfunding type micropayment models where you're just paying 10 cents here, 50 cents here, whatever small amount. You don't have to pay if you don't want to, but you now know that this content will be supported financially. The business will be able to pay all the tech bills and the staffing bills and whatever because of your support, and you can trust that there'll be more honest reporting than you would have in the traditional advertiser model. I'm not saying that all journalists are lying and all media is deceptive, but I have had my own experiences with this issue. It comes up. It's inevitable when you have these two agendas, these two masters to serve. One day will come when you can't serve both, and you're always going to have to pick the one who pays you. Or you get fired. Like that's the reality. So this new business model will, I think, totally shift how internet is consumed, how media is disseminated, and how the honest conversations that we can all have online. So those are just my rambling thoughts about this. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.